Okay, welcome to another video, and today we're going to be starting with our sort of coverage of the new round of Ubuntu releases of 22.04 Jammy Jellyfish. So we're going to go straight into it today with just the standard version of Ubuntu, then we'll check out some of the other flavors following this video. So first up in the new features we have the Linux kernel. So Ubuntu 22.04 ships multiple optimized kernels on a per product basis. So for Ubuntu desktop we'll automatically opt in to version 5.17, and Ubuntu desktop uses a rolling HWE kernel, and the rolling HWE kernel is based on 5.15. And then we have some different kernels here for the Ubuntu server and Ubuntu cloud images. And for NVIDIA users, Ubuntu 22.04 adds the Linux restricted modules and NVIDIA drivers on ARM64, and users on ARM can now also use the Ubuntu driver tool to install and configure NVIDIA drivers from the Ubuntu archive. And then for your toolchain upgrade, you'll get new versions of things like GCC, binutils, glibc, Python, and all of that good stuff. And we have a new version of systemd, which is at version 2.49. And then we have OpenSSL 3.0. We have a few security improvements here, and NF tables is now the default backend for the firewall. And now what we're going to be focusing mainly on today is the Ubuntu desktop. So Ubuntu now offers 10 color choices, each in a dark and light style, so we'll definitely be checking that out. Now, this is going to upset some people and probably not bother other people. So Firefox is now only provided in Ubuntu as a snap. So I first noticed this when I was playing around in the daily builds of Ubuntu 22.04. I had the native package and then I've done an update in the terminal and it warned me that it's going to be removed and it's no longer going to be there. But we won't speak too much on that. So some of the benefits include directly maintained by Mozilla, more maintainable for the entire Ubuntu LTS lifecycle. This means faster access to the newest Firefox versions. And you can also easily switch to different Firefox flavor with snap channels, so things like your stable, candidate, beta, and edge. It's sandboxed for improved security hardening for this critical app. We then have desktop icons are shown in the bottom right by default, but this can be changed with the new settings added to the appearance panel of the settings app. Also, there are new settings to control the dock look and behavior, and dock devices and file manager integration has been improved. Now moving on to our desktop environment of GNOME. So it's been updated to include new features and fixes from GNOME 41 and GNOME 42. Several apps are still their 41 version numbers to provide a more time-tested experience for the LTS desktop by mostly avoiding libadwaita. Okay, the new cross-desktop dark style preference is supported, and GNOME Shell and Mutter have lots of performance improvements, including the triple buffering patch. The default sessions for most systems that don't have a NVIDIA graphics card is now Wayland. Okay. If you need a non-Wayland session, you can of course just click the little settings cog in your login screen and switch over. Hardware with privacy screen support is now supported, and RDP is now available for sharing your desktop remotely. Legacy VNC is still available. Now personally, I'm actually quite up for this, so on my own machines I often just set up sort of XRDP and log into a remote X11 session. I find it just works a bit better these days, and it also supports all things like touchscreens and stuff out of the box if you're using like your phone or something. So I'm all good with that. We'll check that out with another machine and remote into it, make sure we've got no issues there. So that's all good. And then we have some updated applications. So Firefox is version 99, LibreOffice is 7.3, and Thunderbird, which is your email client, is 91. And then we have all of these updated subsystems here as well. Like I said, I will leave a link to this in the description below if you want to read a little bit more into it. So you can go ahead and grab a fresh ISO, or you can of course upgrade to it from an existing Ubuntu installation. Now the ISO is quite large, it's about 3.4 GB, but with that being said, let's jump into it and get this installed. Right, here we are. Now we are installing this natively, but for those of you who have seen the installation of Ubuntu a million times before, I want to skip straight to the desktop. There'll be a timestamp for you down below. For those of you that haven't, stick around and we're going to run through the whole installation. So we could do a try Ubuntu and go into a live environment, test a few things out and install it from there. But we're going to go straight into it with install Ubuntu. First up is our keyboard layout, which for me is a UK, and then we've got this little box down below to make sure the keyboard is all working, and then we'll go to the next step. So for updates and other software, when I'm setting up my own machines, I always opt to do a minimal installation, so then I can choose the applications and packages I want to have included. But we're going to do the full fat installation because it's a new release and we like to check things out, and that'll include everything like web browser, utilities, office, software, games, and media players. And we are also going to go ahead and install third-party software. Continue. And there we go. So you can see we've got completely clean drives today. So we're just going to go for a straightforward erase disk and install Ubuntu. And that's usually just going to give you two partitions with a sort of third swap file as opposed to a partition. My camera keeps flickering. I hope that we are all good. So as you can see here, it's going to format two partitions, one for our ESP and then the rest is all assigned to your root partition, with ext4 being your default file system, and you'll probably get a 2 GB swap file. Continue. Where are you? I'm more, so actually, yeah, that'll do. We're close enough. Continue. And now we're going to do our user account. So Tyler, computer name, let's go for Jelly Boy. There we go, living a dream. Type in our password. Now we are going to log in automatically and it should get us straight into the Wayland session as opposed to X11 because we aren't using sort of NVIDIA drivers, but we shall see once we are fully installed. And we could also use Active Directory if we sort of use Active Directory, and continue. So that should be everything. So what I'll do now is pause the video here and then we'll come back once it's finished. And there we go. So installation has complete without any issues whatsoever and was done in no time at all on my machine. So let's reboot and check out our freshly installed Ubuntu 22.04. And here we are. So we'll quickly just get through this sort of little welcome sort of screen here for Ubuntu. Ubuntu doesn't really tend to do full sort of welcome screens that you'll find in other sort of GNOME sort of distros like Fedora or stuff. So it'll be very brief. So we're not going to send any additional info. And we aren't going to enable the location services, and that'll be pretty much it for Ubuntu. And here it just tells you how to go ahead and install software. Now let's get out of that. So here is our nice new wallpaper. Now I knew as soon as I heard the Jelly Jamfish theme that we would get some good wallpapers because you're kind of being blessed with that kind of code name, because jellyfishes always look quite cool for wallpapers. I think they could have probably done something a little bit better here. I think I prefer the Ubuntu Mate colours from what I've seen. However, I've really not checked them all out, so we'll see how we go with some of the other flavours. Now, of course, before we start checking things out, we're just going to quickly jump into the about, just to double check that it has indeed sort of defaulted us to a Wayland session. So for the windowing system, we are indeed using a Wayland, and our GNOME version is, of course, 42.0. Isn't saying what our kernel is, so let's just quickly open up a terminal. It should be 5.15, I do believe, from what we saw in the release notes there. Keyboard is driving me insane, and there we go, so kernel there at 5.15. So let's close that all off, and let's close that all off. We'll come back into this in a moment because we're going to spend a fair bit of time checking out the sort of new changes to the appearance. We'll also jump into the multitasking as well as sharing for the new remote desktop over RDP. Okay, so here's your standard kind of Ubuntu desktop with your nice little dock on the left, and this is what it looks like in the overview. Actually, that looks a little bit better from the last time I've seen it. I don't know if they've done any work there to make the dock look a bit better in GNOME 40, or either it's just grown on me, because I remember when I first checked Ubuntu with GNOME 40, I didn't quite like the way the dock interacted, but actually that doesn't look too bad at all. Now, while I was playing around with this in the daily build, I did notice a nice little workspace switcher when you switch down to workspaces. As you can see at the bottom here, we have that little sort of, almost like a pill tablet kind of cut out there, letting you know how many virtual desktops you have and what sort of desktop you're transitioning to. A nice little sort of indicator there that I do quite appreciate, because I don't think most GNOME sort of 40s do that. However, of course, you can just go into there and see it as well, but I like having that little sort of pill cut out there on the screen. Now we of course have our left panel and our top dock, and here's where you're going to get to your sort of settings here, and then of course you have your notifications here, and then we can jump into all applications with our Ubuntu dock on the left. Now if we just quickly open up an application, so we'll open up Nautilus. So we've got some nice sort of rounded corners as well, so Ubuntu is starting to look a little bit more modern and clean, and I do actually like that we've got a new icon now for Nautilus. If I remember correctly, it previously used to be a very square, blocky kind of icon, looked a little bit out of place, because I do overall really like Ubuntu sort of icon set. Do think it's a very nice sort of cohesive set of icons that complements the desktop very well. Now for the dock itself, sort of by default it's not set to any sort of intelligent hide, and as you can see there is a nice bit of transparency going on underneath it, and your top bar is going to be a completely solid colour like so. Now I think what we're going to do then is we'll jump straight into the settings actually, and we'll start playing around with the sort of the appearance and then checking out some of the new accent colours. And I'm also going to go ahead and install HTOP as well, because at some point we will be sort of seeing how much RAM there are, how much RAM we use on a fresh boot before we make any changes to the system. So let's just go ahead and install that. Okay, so let's jump into it with settings and let's just close that off and then we can see what's what. So by default, you're going to have a nice sort of dark panel theming there, and I think that's the same across all of their theming, but your sort of application windows are going to be the sort of light color there for the application windows. Ubuntu Store is probably going to take a little bit of time to open up. I think that is also a snap by default, but while we wait, there we go. So yeah, all of your applications for the most part, of course, apart from your terminal, on the default theme is going to be light, and then things like your terminal will be dark. I don't mind that. I'm more of a dark theme kind of guy, and the dark theme is also quite nice. We have some updates to get for Snapd, so let's go ahead and grab the updates there. And then we'll let that do its business, minimize while we check some of this out. So we're going to go straight into it with background to see if there's any other variations of the jellyfish theme. So we've got a couple here, and then we have the sort of light, sort of white sort of colour there as well. Now in appearance, oh well, so we've got a few things here that we can actually do. I quite like the way this looks actually, just for the settings. It's nice to have that all built in and not have to use a sort of standalone application or something like GNOME tweaks or something. So we have the light theme here that we're currently on, and then we of course have the dark theme. Yeah, very nice dark theme. I do actually really like the dark theme. Drag that and drop that and see what that looks like with two applications open. Yeah, nice. I like it a lot. I would usually leave it on the dark theme, but YouTube seems to just destroy black colors for me, so we're going to leave it on the light theme so it just looks a little bit nicer on the YouTube upload there. Okay, and then we have all of these accent colors, with the default being this little orange here, and then we have a nice little sort of shades of green, and of course that's going to change things like your button sliders, your accent colors on left hand panels, and it's also going to actually change the shading behind the folder icon itself. So as you can see, it's the same as here as well. And let's just quickly go through these very quickly and settle on one that we think looks the best. Got the purple there. Purple don't look too bad. Blue. I'll tell you what, let's leave it on this blue for the time being. No, I don't think I like that. I'll tell you what, we're just going to leave it on the default orange for now. Okay, and now let's scroll down. Let's just close this off. So here we have the desktop icons. So as they said, by default, they're all going to sort of open at the bottom right hand side. Probably makes sense because, you know, you've got this here that will hide things underneath it, and if you had it sort of top left here. So I think bottom right on the Ubuntu desktop, when you consider you've got the dock as well, makes a little bit of sense. I'm not a huge fan of desktop icons, so I'll tend to just disable these entirely. I do not know what's going on with that camera. Anyway, so we've got some options here. So we have the size. We're currently on normal, but we also have small, large and tiny. So let's just quickly check out what they do. So that's small, that's large, and that's tiny. Okay, so we'll leave it on normal, although I am just going to completely remove it anyway. And then we have our dock. Now, the thing I like about their auto hide option is it's basically intelligent hide or sort of Windows dodge. So of course, when you've not got nothing, when you've got it just standard always on the screen, it's going to sort of take a lot of your screen real estate there. But then you can just go ahead and do auto hide. And again, like, it's going to be an intelligent hide. So as long as nothing's touching it or interacting with it, it will stay on the screen, which is my preferred way of having the dock as opposed to auto hide. Because I hate always having to move my mouse over there to reveal the sort of applications that I've got if I don't have anything sort of maximized. So if, as you now can see, if you maximize an application, it could be a nice clear animation and slide off the screen, giving that little bit of extra screen real estate there. And then it's going to pop back over nice and fluidly like so. And again, it's going to be whenever any application window gets near it. So yeah, much prefer that to a standard auto hide where it's always going to be hidden until you sort of press or reveal it. It's just not my kind of workflow. And then we have our panel mode. So it's kind of been a mainstay for Ubuntu since like the Unity days, and maybe even a little bit before, to always have your left panel sort of stretch to sort of full extension of your display. And I actually quite like that, but for those of you that do like a sort of docked mode kind of thing here, we have the panel mode here. So then clicking that will then make it into a more of a sort of a dock-like experience. And that's what it's going to look like in kind of your overview there. And of course, you can change the position to anywhere on the screen apart from top, because that is where your top panel is. So there's that on the bottom. And for you heathens, you can even have it on the right there. There we go. We're going to chuck it back on the left now. So let's chuck that to the left. And again, we're just going to extend it because I quite like that. And we will just make it a little bit smaller. Perfect. Okay. So you can do quite a lot with the actual dock, even just from within your settings. And you can, change it panel dock, whatever you fancy. So I do quite like the way Ubuntu dock is working these days. And then we also have the option here to configure the dock behavior. So as you can see, we have show volumes and drives. So if you plugged it in sort of a USB drive or hard drive, it will then pop up there, much like your rubbish bin is, but you can also hide your rubbish bin as well. I'll leave it there for the moment. Now for multitasking, this isn't so much new, but I do like the way that this is now in the kind of control center, and I do very much appreciate that Ubuntu, unlike some others, don't actually have hot corners enabled by default. And of course, a hot corner is where you'll fling your mouse to a sort of corner of your screen and it's going to do an action. So the default one would be going into your overview. Now I know some people really do like it, but for me it's more of a hindrance because I'll often trigger it when I don't want to. So I'm glad to see that that is disabled by default. And then of course we have the screen edges to sort of snap your applications and all of that good stuff. Does it now work with corners? I don't think so. Okay. Now for your workspaces, of course we have them dynamic, but we can switch it to a fixed number. And then we've got all of the application switching and good stuff as well. Okay, I think we're all up to date now with Ubuntu software. So we should be able to go ahead and close that bad boy. And now what we're going to do is go all the way down to sharing, wherever that might be. There it is. Now, so it's going to ask you to set a password for your keyring. Okay, so we have these options here of remote desktop and media sharing. Remote desktop appears to be on. So if we open this up now, we have to actually enable the remote control. So it will allow you to sort of control parts of your screen. And it should pop up with a little indicator up here, the way Wayland does when you're screen sharing. We'll test all of this out in a moment anyway. But for now, we're just going to make sure it's enabled. Okay, so it tells you how to sort of go ahead and connect it. I tend to prefer to use a IP address as opposed to a host name. So while we're here, let's quickly just double check what IP address we have been assigned. 203. So I'm going to connect via an IP instead of the host name when we do test it out on a different machine. And now for the authentication, it's going to use your sort of standard username here. And now for a password, we haven't set a password, so it appears that it's auto-generate. Yes, okay. So by default, it appears that it's going to auto-generate a password, but can you type in a password? You can. Okay, we'll come back to this in just a moment. So let's close that off for now. Now what I want to do is do a quick reboot so we can see how much RAM we're using and then we can start playing around with the system. Okay, we've just done a reboot and let the uptime just get to about a minute or so we can see how much RAM we're using on a fresh boot. Actually a little bit higher than I would have expected. So we're sitting at just under 900 MB. I'm sure we can get that low if we wanted to tinker around with things or do a minimal installation, but it's not too much to worry about. If you're using GNOME anyway, you're not someone that's too concerned with your RAM usage. And then just beneath that, we can indeed see that it's created as a swap file of 2 GB. Oh dear, so we've now got a little pop-up. The application's password and keys has closed unexpectedly. We won't send that for the moment, but there we go. So that's our first little thing we've run into. And perhaps that's why the RAM is a little bit higher than I would have expected. We'll check it out once more before the end of the video. So let's close that off. Now, what I want to do is jump into the applications very briefly. We won't spend too much time here because insofar as the actual application is set, there's not too much new stuff. However, there is some updated versions of applications. So with the full install, you'll get a fair amount of applications. So you have things for videos, your text editors, you'll have your full LibreOffice suite. And of course, LibreOffice is one of the applications that's got a new version in this release of a 7.3. So let's just quickly open that up and close that bad boy. As you can see there, we are using a version 7.3 and it will all work with your automatic spell checking against the dictionary that you're using on Ubuntu. They're very good with things like that. So let's close that off and go back into the applications and see anything that we might want to have a look at. So we have backups there. So that's going to be Deja Duck, quite a useful sort of easy to use sort of backup tool that you can schedule. And then we have a Remina as a remote desktop client, and that's probably the application we're going to use on my Fedora Silverblue system to see if that's all working with the remote desktop in just a moment. And we might also see if we can set up the RDP on my phone, because I do have quite a few Linux systems that I've set up with XRDP that I remote into an X11 session. And I do really like it because it works all out of the box with touch and things like that. So we'll see if that's working out of the box as well on Ubuntu 22.04. Okay, so we know that we have got the newer version of LibreOffice, but we also have a newer version of Thunderbird. I do believe this is now running at version 91. Thunderbird, perhaps not my favorite desktop email client on GNOME. I prefer to actually use Evolution. I feel it just sort of integrates a bit better with sort of the whole sort of GNOME ecosystem. But this would probably be my sort of second choice if I couldn't use Evolution on the GNOME desktop environment. And then there's one more application that's going to annoy some people that is now Firefox, and I do believe it's now version 99, but of course it is now a snap and snap only. So if you type in snap list, you can see that we are indeed using Firefox there as a snap. Now, I realised that this was happening a little while ago when the sort of first daily builds were made available and I was playing around with it. It started as a native application when I first installed it. And then a little while after that, after sort of the updates and getting closer to the beta came in, I've done an update in the terminal and it told me that it's going to be removing the native package and no longer sort of supplying it. So you are going to be stuck with your snap version of Firefox. Let's go ahead and open that now. It will take a little while to launch for the first time. It's just sort of the nature of Snap. And there are a few things that I'm wondering. I don't use Snap too heavy myself, so there's a few things I do want to see if it's actually going to work. So as we're on a GNOME system, something that I like to do on GNOME and a lot of people is use extensions to kind of complete your overall desktop workflow. Now, we usually use an application to sort of connect with that called Chrome GNOME Shell. So let's go ahead and quickly install Chrome GNOME Shell. And we're going to go ahead and go onto the GNOME Shell Extensions website. I don't think it's going to be able to connect to it, at least out of the box. Someone who's more familiar with Snap packages might, let me know if you can just enable something to let it connect. But from what I understand, it won't work just by simply doing the things that you think would make it work. So we're going to add that extension now. And now if we go into our terminal, that is installed, so that's good to go. So let's just quickly give it the best chance possible and just reopen Firefox once more. And then go back to our GNOME Shell extension. There we go. So it's going to say, yeah, it's not found the native host connector. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that. Like I say, I'm not really a heavy Snap user, but I am someone who does like to install extensions. So what we're going to do is set up Flatpak, because that's my preferred sort of multi-format application package, if you like, as well as app images. Nothing against Snap. I've just not used it as much as the other two. So what we're going to do, install Flatpak. We'll grab the FlatHub repository. And we're going to set up an application I really enjoy that I only recently found called Extensions Manager. So I'll pause the video and come back once we've set things up. Okay, so you've gone ahead and set up all of our sort of Flatpak and FlatHub integration and installed one of my new favorite applications when I'm using GNOME, which is called the Extension Manager. I'm sure there probably is other sources to get it from, but I quite like just grabbing it from a FlatHub. Now, what's cool about it is, especially for sort of systems that make it a bit trickier to sort of actually browse through the GNOME extensions, because there are ways of just installing them through sort of your software center in some cases. It's nice to be able to browse through things, and that's what Extension Manager makes very easy, as well as managing them, and I've been using it a lot on Silverblue. And I was really excited that when I found this, I sort of shared it in my Discord. People let me know very quickly that I was quite late to the party there, but there we go. I haven't been using GNOME a lot lately, so I didn't know that this has actually been released. But let's go ahead and see what extensions we are using out of the box. Ubuntu doesn't actually tend to use too many extensions, so although it does feel quite different to a sort of stock vanilla flavor of GNOME, they don't go too crazy with additional extensions. You just have the desktop icons, which again will appear at the bottom right by default, your Ubuntu app indicators, and then you have your dock. But what I like about this application is that not only can we manage our sort of installed extensions, we can also browse for and install new ones, all from about one place, and it just sort of has it all in one central place for you, so you don't have to go to different places to grab your bits and pieces. So all we're going to do is just quickly grab one that I sort of always need on my GNOME desktop. And if I was to use Ubuntu for a little bit longer, I'd install a few more as well, but we're just going to go ahead and just stick with caffeine like so, and there you go. So that's installed absolutely easy. So I'm just going to stick with that instead of trying to sort of connect the GNOME Shell extension with the Snap version of Firefox. Like I said, I might just be very ignorant on that. Maybe there is a way you can do it. I don't use Snap, so I don't really know how that all works together. Now, Before we wrap things up, I did say that we're going to test out the remote desktop, the RDP protocol, on a few different machines. So before we do that, I just want to go back into the settings and just sort of make sure everything is enabled. So let's ask us for our keyring. Bang. Okay. So we're going to go on to remote desktop. Okay, so everything's enabled, but it appears that our password has changed. Okay, so what it appears it's going to do is after every session ends and you start a new one, it's going to give you a new auto-generated password. Good for security, probably a little bit annoying if you sort of just want one password to set and forget. But yeah, so it appears that it's just going to sort of auto-generate you a new password. Again, good for security, so I wouldn't worry too much. I'm going to go ahead and just change it so I don't have to sort of memorize what's on the screen there when we switch over, and hopefully that will take effect. So everything is enabled, and like I said, it's using RDP now instead of the VNC protocol. So we'll close that off. I'm just going to switch a few things around and plug the laptop into the capture card, and we'll see if it will connect without any issues. Okay, so we've jumped over onto my Silverblue installation and we've opened up Remina. I tried to use the connections application that comes pre-installed in Silverblue and it was just being a bit finicky. So we're going to try it with Remina and see how we go. Oh, and also I've really been enjoying Silverblue, been using it for like 2 weeks-ish now on my main laptop. And when the newer version comes out, I think we'll do more of a long-term sort of review of that one, just to show you the sort of difference between that and a traditional sort of Linux distribution. But for now, we're going to see if we can use RDP to connect to our Ubuntu session. So, like I said, I'm going to stick with the IP because it's easier for me to sort of remember. 203, I do believe it was. Okay, so it's found the machine. It's asking to accept the certificate. It's going to ask you for the password. Now, I have removed the display from the capture card, so hopefully the resolution doesn't go too crazy, but it might do, so we shall see. Okay, it didn't like that. Give me a second. It might be due to the display that I've messed around with. Okay, we are back and it's worked. So it appeared it wouldn't want to do it headless, but I have these little nifty virtual displays. They're basically just a HDMI connection with like nothing. So it's like a headless HDMI connection. You just plug it in and you can use that as a virtual display. So we should now be able to full screen this in full resolution. So let's have a look. Let's go ahead and open this bad boy up into full screen. And bang, there we go. We've got a full screen session of our Ubuntu session that we have connected through RDP. So let's see how quickly sort of things feel. Okay, let's open up an application. Not too bad at all, actually. It feels very fluid. This is all over Wi-Fi as well, so it's all wireless, connected to each other. Apart from the host machine is on Ethernet, but otherwise, that's not too bad at all. Interesting. That actually runs very nice and seamless using these sort of built-in remote desktop functions that they've got there. Let's just have a look at the animation. Yeah, not really any animation there, but for a sort of workable sort of remote desktop session, that is definitely very usable to just do some quick little things that you might need to do there. Now what we're going to do is get out of this session and we're going to see if we can set it up with touch input on my phone. Okay, we got it to work after a few reboots and just sort of messing around with things. I've let it keep the sort of auto-generated password this time as well, and it appears that we are good to go. It doesn't appear to work with the auto-rotating though, so it's stuck in this landscape view, which isn't the worst. Now let's see if we can get it to go ahead and actually work with the touch screen. So, doesn't appear to. Hold on. Interesting. Let me see if we can get some mouse action with this one. Okay, so we've got a mouse. Zoom's working. Right, let's see if we can actually do anything with the mouse. Can we click? Okay, I think we're a little bit out of luck. At least I've not had much luck with the actual input. No, we've managed to actually get onto it with the actual RDP client on the phone. Perhaps if we use a different remote desktop client as opposed to this official one, it would work. But from my testing, albeit very limited, it's not currently working with the official RDP app. I'll try something else maybe another day, but I think we'll wrap it up there for now on at least the phone. We had no issues using Remina on another machine. However, it did struggle a little bit when I was trying it out with the connections application on Fedora. So it appears it works very fluidly and fast when it does work, but I've had a little bit of hit and miss with certain sort of remote desktop clients. But I am still happy that it is using RDP, to be honest. All in all, I know a lot of people aren't super excited about this release, but I don't think it's too bad, to be honest. I don't think they've, introduced amazing new features and stacked them on top of each other. I think they've just built on an already sort of very strong and reliable base, which is Ubuntu, and it's still a distribution that I have a lot of time for and would be happy to use. A couple of little things in here that I'm not massive fans of that they've sort of introduced in this newer version, but nothing that would be enough to dissuade me from using Ubuntu on my own machines anyway. Now, the exciting stuff that we're going to be doing with Ubuntu moving forward is we're going to try and go through, if not all of the flavors, we'll check out some of my favorite ones. The first one being Ubuntu Budgie. I have this sort of running sort of video where I'm running out of names now because it's my favorite flavor. So we'll see how we go with the new version of Ubuntu Budgie as well, and we'll also check things like Kubuntu and also Ubuntu Studio. I'm quite interested in seeing how that would work in my workflow as a sort of a daily driver to do all these video things as well. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and if you've really enjoyed it, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Join the Discord, there'll be a link in the description below and also in the pinned comment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.